Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Glenn Meter Podcast. In this episode, which is episode 3, I'm titling it A Deeper Dive into the Fed-Created Chaos. So, in my last episode, I explained what I really think is going on in our world right now. In a nutshell, I believe that the Federal Reserve, which is a privately owned bank that has complete control over our monetary system, has destroyed the U.S. dollar with its modern monetary policy. The dollar is about to crash and go into hyperinflation, which will be devastating and will change the U.S. forever and change the world forever. The Fed knows that the crash is coming, but the Fed does not want the crash to be seen as their fault, because then people will see the scam that they have inflicted on us for the past 100 years, and we would kick them out. So the Fed and other central bankers have been looking for something to hide the crash in, and along comes the Mexican beer illness, which is not real. It's really not nearly as serious as what they say it is. They keep hyping it up. They keep the fear-mongering going. The media's in bed with them. They keep the chaos going. And some people say that the Mexican beer illness was a man-made bioweapon, either by China or the CIA, but I'm not going to go there. It may be true, and if so, it just shows the level of evil we're dealing with. But whether it was man-made or it was simply the right crisis at the right time, I don't know. Do I think they would have manufactured a bioweapon to create this event? Absolutely. Do I think they did that? I don't know. I'm personally leaning to it just being the right crisis at the right time that they could manipulate and blow it way out of proportion, but I may be wrong. The main thing that I don't want to do, though, is let the discussion get off point, though, because the Fed's main weapons are, first, to remain hidden in plain sight, and two, to do anything, including chaos, wars, destruction, or even declassifying UFOs or whatever they're trying to distract us with now, just to keep the spotlight off of them. So what I want to do is to clearly look at what's going on and not be distracted by these things that they want to distract us with. The relevant point here is that the currency crisis is very severe, and I think they had to make their move when they did, or the dollar would have already crashed. The QE infinity, which is what they've dubbed it for this year, has allowed them to temporarily keep the dollar alive, but it's also made the crash that's coming that much more worse. So let's dive into a couple points here. Modern monetary policy simply means that they're printing, or more accurately, they're creating digital currency out of thin air. But you can't just create endless amounts of currency without repercussions. There is a cause and effect. So how much currency is the U.S. printing right now? So think about this. In the past year, the U.S. has printed about 25% of all U.S. dollars it's ever printed in its 200-year history. 25% in the past 12 months. The U.S. dollar has been around for about 200 years, and the bulk of that time it was backed by gold. And as soon as they unpegged the dollar from gold, they started the printing presses, and they've never stopped. Which is the entire purpose for having gold-backed money, because it forces governments to have discipline, but the governments hate discipline. They don't want that. They want to print and print and print. The effect of printing so much money, and I mean not money, currency, is that hyperinflation is inevitable. Hyperinflation is when the prices of products rise dramatically, and that's what happened in Weimar Germany in 1923, and it's happened in many other places since then. This is where the story of people needing wheelbarrows full of cash to buy a loaf of bread comes from. So, for example, in 1920, there were 50 German marks to a U.S. dollar. Within 3 years, Germany printed so many marks that by 1923, 3 years later, there were 1.4 trillion marks to the dollar. This has happened with many other currencies such as Zimbabwe and Venezuela, and it happens to any and all fiat currencies that they literally print to death. So why? Why do they print this? Why do they print currencies to death? And it really comes down to it's because human nature. Anyone who owns the printing presses and can print as much money as they want will. But let's be clear, it is a form of stealing. It is absolute stealing. When they print money, they're not stealing your money, but they're stealing the purchasing power of the currency. People don't notice this direct cause. All they see is the result, which is ever increasing prices. The portion size keeps getting smaller, but the result is that it's constantly harder to keep your head above water. Health insurance keeps going up. All of these other prices keep going up. This is because of the printing of the currency. And the central banks get away with it for a while, sometimes a long time. The Federal Reserve has mastered the art of hiding these rising prices, and they primarily do this by exporting dollars overseas, which we can do because the U.S. dollar is basically the reserve currency of the world. So they export dollars, which means that the loss of buying power is spread over not just U.S. citizens, but billions of people around the world. So in other words, the people of the world are getting screwed by the U.S. dollar, and the people of the U.S. are getting screwed by the U.S. dollar too. The countries and people that hold U.S. dollars have to absorb the loss of purchasing power that results from unlimited money creation. So most economists will say that these countries don't have an alternative. Yes, the dollar's losing value, but all currencies are losing more. All other currencies are losing more value. And this is true to a point. All other countries also have central banks, and they also print money like crazy. And most of them are not reserve currencies, so the devaluation happens faster with them. The policy of excess money printing is basically forced on them by the IMF, which is also a private organization. But countries do have another choice. Countries don't need to hold U.S. dollars as a store of value. They can hold gold and silver and commodities. And in fact, this is what China is doing right now. They're dropping the dollar and they're going to hold commodities and gold. They've already announced that they're going to reduce their U.S. dollar holdings from over $1 trillion to $800 billion. But it's just a matter of time before they drop it all. And they're not going to tell anyone ahead of time that they're going to totally get out of the U.S. dollar, because that would cause commodity prices to rise dramatically, because other countries would not want to be left holding the bag. So one day, and I think it will be soon, we will learn that China has divested itself of all U.S. dollars and assets. China, Russia, and many other central banks have been loading up on gold because gold is what the world turns to when the currencies collapse. Then the rest of the world will get on the bandwagon because it will be a clear indication that the faith in the U.S. dollar is collapsing, and no country will want to be the last one holding worthless dollars. This is how the dollar will collapse, I think. And just to be clear, this is an inevitable outcome. The Federal Reserve printed too much currency, and they know it. And the only way to reverse this would be to increase interest rates, which the economy is not strong enough to handle, and to massively cut the size of government, which no one politically is willing to talk about that. So the Fed maintains its power by staying out of the public eye. They are hidden in plain sight. People know about the Fed, but they just think the Fed is the same thing as the U.S. Treasury, but it's not. The Federal Reserve is a private bank, or actually it's more accurate that it's a cartel of privately owned banks. So the Fed has complete control over printing U.S. dollars and where those printed U.S. dollars go. Congress, which is supposed to be in control of the U.S. monetary supply based on what the Constitution says, abdicated this responsibility to the Federal Reserve in 1913. So think about this. We talk about Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos as being the richest people in the world, But in reality, they aren't even close. The richest and most powerful people are the people who literally own money and have complete control over money. As I said, they know that they have overprinted the dollar and it's about to collapse. There's nothing that they can do to stop the collapse, but what they can do is not be blamed for the collapse. So they're looking for an event to hide the collapse in. And they want to hide it in another collapse so people don't see that they don't think it's their fault. So what would be the perfect excuse? A pandemic that shuts down the global economy. So they and other central banks around the world manipulate the media and government to shut down the economy. This shutdown causes all kinds of chaos, which they love because it takes the spotlight off of them. Then when the collapse happens, it can be blamed on the pandemic and the shutdown. Then the Fed and the other central bankers can come to the rescue with an economic reset, which means that they get to keep their power. The only thing that matters to them is power. They don't care who they will crush, whose lives they will destroy. They don't give a damn about America. They don't care about anything except their own power. So I want to point three things out about the Fed. First of all, the Federal Reserve is not the first incarnation of a U.S. central bank. In fact, it's the fourth. When the bankers got together to create the Federal Reserve, they looked at all of the failures of the past, and they had to solve one primary problem. They had to become invisible. So their main defense was to be hidden in plain sight. So people see the Fed, and they think the Treasury. They don't know that. I would say 1 out of 500,000 people maybe really understand what the Fed is, that it's a privately owned bank, and that it's not part of our government. So, like I said, they did this by making people think that they were a government entity instead of what they really are, is a privately owned bank. So they name it the Federal Reserve, which is not accurate. They're not federal, and they don't have any reserves. And they had a government-filled board, so everything looks official. So this allows them to hide in plain sight. But remember that the thing the Fed fears the most is to have the spotlight pointed at them. They will do anything, pull any lever, cause any amount of chaos to keep the spotlight off of them. So the next point I want to say about our financial system is, have you ever questioned why the average person learns absolutely nothing about money, how money works, how the economy works in school? We go to school to learn to get a job or be an entrepreneur or whatever, to make money, but we never learn about how money works. And in my opinion, this is not by mistake. The scam that the Fed inflicts upon the U.S. only works if people have no idea what is going on. This is why I suggest that everyone watch the Hidden Secrets of Money video series by goldsilver.com. And so go to their YouTube page and watch the first 7 Hidden Secrets of Money videos. And I think they've got 10 or something like that. But if you watch it, you will understand more about how money works and how economies work than if you graduate with a master's degree of economics. People who study economics at university only learn the very complex economic theories that the Fed wants them to learn. And that's why economics is so boring, so complex, all of that stuff. But that's not true. Economics is actually incredibly interesting, but you have to learn it the right way. And so this brings me to my third point. I think it's important to understand that there are different theories of economics. The most common theory, and the one that 99% of economists follow, is called Keynesian economics. This is where modern monetary policy comes from. Basically, Keynesian economists believe that you can control an economy by pulling certain levers. It's a very complex form of economics that looks at all kinds of metrics and then pushes money all around. It's all about market manipulation. Pump money in here, lower this interest rate, whatever it takes to have constant expansion. Another theory of economics is called Austrian economics. Austrian economics is a more common sense understanding of economics, and in my opinion, it's much easier to understand and it's much more accurate. Basically, it acknowledges that there is cause and effect. If you manipulate this industry, you cause a bubble that will eventually collapse. The more money you print, the less value currency will eventually have until all value is gone. It looks at an economy as an ecosystem. People are irrational and hard to predict, but it's all guided by laws of nature, and you can't outsmart nature. It's clear that Austrian economists have a much better understanding of how economies really work, and they're very good at predicting crashes, although the timing, it's hard to figure out the timing of the crashes, but they know what crashes will happen. So the Fed is controlled by Keynesian economists, and this is who you'll see on CNN and CNBC and all this stuff. They're all Keynesian economists. They're very skilled at manipulating markets, but Austrian economists see all of this manipulation as folly. The more you manipulate a market, the bigger the bubble and the harder the crash. And Austrians are right about this, but I do disagree with Austrian economists in one way. They see the Fed as a bunch of bumbling fools that don't understand how the economy really works. The Austrian economists see that the Fed have created a massive currency bubble and that it's going to collapse with devastating effects. And they think that the Fed will be totally surprised by this, and they are actually looking forward to it in a way because they think that the Fed will be their scam that they've been inflicting on us for the past 100 years will be exposed and they'll be kicked out. But I see it differently. There is a good book out called The Confessions of an Economic Hitman. And in this book, the author talks about working at a huge engineering firm that would create huge projects such as dams and ports and national roadways for different countries. He said that the business was a real business, the engineering firm, and that 95% of the people in the business did legitimate jobs. But there was a dark secret to the engineering firm that only 3 to 5% of the employees were aware of and took part in. This engineering firm was basically a front for the CIA and the NSA. And these people were, the 3 to 5% were the manipulators and assassins that would get into countries and get them to take these huge projects on that the countries couldn't afford. The leaders knew that they couldn't afford it, but they would be blackmailed, and if they didn't go along with it, they'd be assassinated. Because then, by getting into debt to the U.S., then the U.S. had leverage over them. So my point is that it was a legitimate company, but there was a layer in that company that was hidden from the public and hidden from 95% of the employees that were in the company. The employees thought they were just in a regular engineering firm and that it was a legitimate company and they were doing legitimate work. And this is how I think the Federal Reserve works. I think that 95% of the people who work at the Fed are Keynesian economists with a certain mandate and a certain way of doing things. They are master manipulators of the economy. But I think there is 3 to 5% of people at the Fed who are fully aware of what's happening and they're planning for the future. These people are not only Austrian economists, but they're also in charge of the really high-level manipulations and evil stuff that goes on. I think there actually may be a few different layers like this, like peeling an onion. Why do I say this? Because I think this is how these large banks work, but it's also because I don't agree with the Austrians that the Fed is just bumbling along. What we are experiencing right now is manipulation from the absolute highest levels, and it's happening for a purpose. It's happening because the Fed wants to hide the dollar's collapse in another event and then come riding into the rescue. This couldn't happen without the Fed knowing full well what is happening and what's on the horizon. So, on a final point, I want to talk about one other thing, and that's George Soros. Everyone has turned George Soros into this big evil guy manipulating things behind the scenes. And I do believe this is what he does, but he is the showman. The Fed is the one pulling all the strings. They're the ones with infinite money supply. They're the ones creating all the chaos. But they don't want the spotlight on them. They put George Soros out there. He's in the spotlight. And that's how I see it. This is what's going on. And so I'm gonna stop the podcast there. Please share this podcast, like it, tell people about it. I would really appreciate it. I also want to say that I have a weekly newsletter at glennmeter.com, and sign up for the free newsletter. Also, we have a premium membership newsletter, and that premium membership is basically how I get paid. It's a very low monthly fee, and if you want to support an independent voice, I think there's nothing more important that you can do right now in today's world of media corruption, and just it's so hard to find independent voices that you can trust to cut through all of the distractions, all of the other stuff that's going on. And when you find the independent voices, you got to support them, because we're independent. I don't get a salary from anyone from doing this. This podcast took a lot of work to put together. I do my newsletter, which takes a lot of work too. So I would love your support. So go to glennmeter.com and become a premium member, and you'll get access to a lot of other content too. So thank you very much. Bye.